Roberto was sitting in his study, his hands absent-mindedly running over the keyboard of his computer. The work seemed never-ending. The piles of documents on his desk were growing, as were the deadlines to meet. Another day of routine, but nothing that hinted at something different. When the clock marked the end of his workday, Roberto lay back for a moment, letting the fatigue fill his bones. He couldn't wait to hear the sound of the door opening, to greet his wife, Alessia. Alessia, also tired but always smiling, was coming home after her shift at the hospital. Every day when she finished her work as a nurse, she longed to hug Roberto, to see him after a day full of sacrifices. Their life together, though still young and relatively peaceful, was their center of everything. But today, something extraordinary was about to happen. Neither of them could have predicted that the doorbell would change their lives forever. When the doorbell rang insistently, breaking the afternoon silence, Roberto couldn't know that it would mark the end of his routine. At first, he thought it was just the postman or a neighbor, but when he got up to open the door, the scene that presented itself was very different. In front of him stood a young woman with a desperate look, holding a child wrapped in a blanket in her arms. Her pale and tired face, her trembling hands, the way she cast nervous glances, signaled an emergency like none Roberto had ever encountered. Despite her disheveled appearance, Roberto immediately sensed the pain and fear the woman was going through. He couldn't understand what was happening, but the urgency in her words made him fear the worst. "Please," the woman begged with a broken voice, "I can't take care of him anymore. He has to stay with you." Roberto was stunned. He didn't know what to do, but the child in his arms was defenseless and fragile. Without saying another word, the young woman placed Matteo, the little one, in his arms and handed him a letter, before quickly walking away, as if propelled by an invisible force. Roberto couldn't move. The child, so small and defenseless, was trembling in his arms. Roberto's heart was racing, but his mind was confused. Who was this woman? Why had she left her son in the hands of strangers? Roberto stared at little Matteo, who was making weak whimpers, and tried to rationalize, but he couldn't. The child needed care, and Roberto certainly wasn't prepared for this. Moments later, Alessia arrived home, just as Roberto was trying to process the scene. Her surprised expression quickly turned into a question when she saw the baby in Roberto's arms. For a moment, Alessia thought she had seen wrong. How could this be? Roberto, her husband, who had never talked about wanting a child, was now holding a baby in his arms. "Roberto, what's going on?" she asked, a note of disbelief in her voice. Her heart stopped for a moment. She thought there might be something dark behind all this, perhaps a betrayal, but quickly she realized it wasn't like that. She trusted him. She stepped closer, and without saying a word, Roberto handed her the letter. When Alessia read the letter, her heart was filled with compassion and sadness. The words told a painful story. A young mother, Carlotta, unable to care for her child, had made the difficult decision to entrust him to someone else. The woman didn't have a husband by her side and had seen Alessia at the hospital during her shift. She saw in her a person who would be able to give the child the care he needed. The letter continued, explaining that Matteo's biological mother had decided to entrust him to them because she felt that only loving and experienced people like Alessia and Roberto could give him the love and attention he needed. At the end of the letter, there was another document confirming the child's custody, but without any official reference or birth certificate. Roberto and Alessia knew nothing about Matteo, except that now he was part of their lives. Alessia, looking at the small, defenseless body, felt a protective instinct begin to rise in her heart. Matteo needed them, and they could never turn their backs on him. Roberto and Alessia's lives began to change radically. They quickly adapted to this new reality, doing everything they could to care for Matteo. Despite the uncertainties and initial difficulties, Alessia took a break from work and dedicated herself entirely to the little one. Every day, along with Roberto, they carefully monitored Matteo's health, worrying about his well-being. The temporary paralysis never stopped their hope. Amidst this chaos, another surprise arrived. One day, Alessia found a stray puppy in their garden. The little dog, trembling with messy fur, seemed lost and scared. Without thinking twice, Alessia picked it up and brought it inside. The puppy, whom they named Toto, seemed to be exactly what they needed: another heart to love. But initially, Toto didn't seem too thrilled about being with Roberto. He looked at his new owner with suspicion, as if he couldn't accept the new situation. Despite his initial behavior, Alessia and Roberto decided to take Toto to the vet for a checkup. The puppy had a mild infection, but the vet confirmed that it was a healthy dog, and that over time Toto would recover. They decided to adopt him, and over the weeks, Toto began to bond with them. In particular, Toto seemed to get closer and closer to Matteo, even though he had initially been wary of him. The daily routine of the Miller family became a mix of challenges and sweetness. Alessia juggled work and caring for Matteo, while Roberto adjusted his schedule to spend more time at home helping. Sleepless nights, constant diaper changes, and worries about Matteo's health became their new normal. But everything changed when Toto began to develop a special bond with Matteo. The little dog, who initially seemed reluctant to interact, turned out to be Matteo's best friend. Every day, Matteo smiled more when he saw Toto. The puppy was proving not only to be an affectionate companion, but also a protector. Sometimes, when Alessia and Roberto worried about Matteo's health, Toto ran toward them, wagging his tail, as if he knew the little one needed comfort. One day, while Matteo was sleeping in his crib, Toto snuggled at his feet, holding him tightly as if he wanted to protect him from any danger. Alessia and Roberto exchanged looks, moved by this gesture that, to them, seemed like a miracle. One night, while Alessia was out running errands and Roberto had fallen asleep on the couch, something extraordinary happened. Matteo, while sleeping, slipped out of the crib and found himself in a dangerous position. His head was almost on the floor, with his body hanging in an unstable way. In an instant, Toto woke up and ran into the room. With the protective instinct that only a loving animal can have, Toto approached Matteo and, with his snout, began to gently push him back toward the crib. It was as if he understood the gravity of the situation. There was no fear in his actions, only a protective determination. Roberto woke up to the sound of Toto's whimpers and immediately ran to Matteo's room. What he saw left him speechless. Toto, with his strength, had prevented Matteo from falling off the bed. He approached the puppy, who continued to watch over the baby, and hugged him with gratitude. The scene he found before him warmed his heart. The miracle of that night didn't end with Matteo's protection, but became a true testimony of how a deep bond could exist between a dog and a child. After that event, Toto seemed to become even more protective of Matteo. Every time the little one moved or made a sound, Toto would immediately approach, watching closely every movement, as if it were his duty to protect him. Despite the daily challenges, Alessia and Roberto couldn't help but feel grateful for everything that was happening. Their life had become a whirlwind of commitments, worries, joys, and challenges, but also an immense opportunity for unconditional love, a love that came from a small furry creature and a child they now called their son. Matteo, despite his condition, was growing up in an environment rich with affection, something that Alessia and Roberto would do anything to nurture. One afternoon, during a walk in their garden, Alessia sat on a bench watching Matteo having fun playing with Toto. The little one was smiling, laughing at the joyful antics of the puppy. Toto ran and jumped around him, and the bond that was growing between them was visible to everyone. Alessia was overwhelmed with emotion. She looked at Roberto, who was watching her with the same sweet smile. "We could never have imagined that our lives would change like this," Alessia said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But there's nothing more beautiful than what we're living." Roberto moved closer to her and took her hand. "Yes, I never would have believed it. But looking at Matteo, looking at Toto, I realize this is our family, and there's nothing that makes me happier. As life went on, Alessia and Roberto learned to balance the daily challenges with the deep love they felt for Matteo and Toto. Despite the difficulties of caring for a child with special needs, the couple faced every challenge with a strength they had never known they possessed. The long nights spent monitoring Matteo's health, the constant diaper changes, the care for his physiotherapy had become part of their routine, but it no longer felt as burdensome as it once did. Meanwhile, Matteo began to gain strength. The little one, although still unable to walk, started to move his arms more agilely and interact more with Toto. His smile became brighter, his voice stronger, and even though the road to full independence seemed long, Alessia and Roberto felt that hope was finally taking root in their lives. One day, during a visit to the doctor, Alessia and Roberto received news they would never forget. The doctors confirmed that Matteo's temporary paralysis was regressing faster than expected. Matteo would be able to walk in the future with the help of an orthopedic device. The joy that exploded in the parents' hearts was indescribable. After months of worry, this news seemed to bring the light they had been looking for. "He made it," said Roberto while holding Alessia's hand. "We're seeing our little miracle." The weeks passed quickly. Matteo was growing day by day, and with him, the bond with Toto. The couple realized that beyond the daily care for Matteo, Toto had played a crucial role in his development. Every time Matteo took a step, Toto was there, jumping around him as if he were his biggest supporter. Although the situation was not easy, Alessia and Roberto felt stronger than before. They had learned to give their all, and they understood that their family, so unique and unexpected, would always be united by the love that bound them, a love that nothing and no one would ever break. The happiness they felt, however, was not just limited to them. Every day when they received visits from friends and family, they noticed the change Matteo brought into everyone's lives. His presence had become a beacon of hope for anyone who met him. Even Toto, with his playful spirit, brought laughter and joy into the house, becoming an irreplaceable part of the family. One day, after months of peaceful life, the doorbell rang again. But this time, Alessia and Roberto knew that something different was about to happen. When Roberto opened the door, he found a woman he immediately recognized, even though he had never seen her before. It was Carlotta, Matteo's biological mother. The woman, visibly nervous and anxious, looked at Roberto with eyes full of emotion. Alessia, who had heard the doorbell, rushed to the door, and as soon as she saw Carlotta, her heart tightened. She didn't know what to expect, but the fear of losing Matteo overwhelmed her. Carlotta, with a trembling voice, asked to come in. "I've received help," she said, "and I found the stability I was looking for. I just want to know that Matteo is okay. I want you to know that I don't want to take him back. He's with you. I entrusted him to you because I knew you would be able to love him." With a sigh of relief, Alessia and Roberto stepped aside, inviting Carlotta in. The woman brought with her a sealed envelope, containing legal documents and a letter explaining her current situation. The letter said that Carlotta had finally recovered and was now ready to close that chapter of her life. She no longer wanted to contest the adoption, but simply wanted to know that Matteo was happy and in good hands. Alessia, though feeling some sadness for the biological mother, accepted her words with understanding. The woman had gone through difficult times, and now all she wanted was peace. The story of Matteo, Toto, and their family didn't stop at Carlotta's visit. Despite everything, Alessia and Roberto knew that life would always surprise them, but that together, as a family, they would face everything with courage. While the Miller family gathered to celebrate every small progress, they realized that their story was an evolving miracle. Meanwhile, Alessia discovered that she was a few months pregnant. Another miracle, another gift that life had reserved for them. The family was growing, but the bond that united them all, humans and animals alike, was now unbreakable. With hope in their hearts, Alessia and Roberto looked to the future. Their family, united by love and resilience, faced every challenge with strength. With Toto by Mateo's side and the blessing of a new baby on the way, they had everything they needed to be happy. Thank you for listening to this story. What do you think? Write it in the comments. And if you liked it, leave a like and subscribe. It helps us a lot. See you soon with a new story.